Hey mate, how are you?
Good, mate. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for joining me on my first podcast. Big wonder.
Big wonder. Look, it's good to be here, mate. Get the first one out and sort of work our way through. I'm sort of quite rapt to be the number one, mate.
Well, I'm honoured to have you. So just for people who are tuning in to our podcast for the first time, just to set the premise a little bit and also tell you what sort of why you're here and what we're doing. I've been listening to podcasts for maybe about 2 years now. I'm an actor, photographer, and now I'm sort of venturing out into the world of writing, as you know.
Yep.
And I always just sit down and listen to these and go, man, I can't wait till I can talk about my project or something on a podcast. Do you know what I mean? Because they become there's so sort of in your mind as you're driving along, and they become part of your everyday life and there's such conversation points, and they're incredibly influential. And they have been for me anyways. And it was only just recently when I was listening to a guy called, now I always get his name back to front because it's two sort of first names, but I want to say his name is Houston Howard, but it could very well be Howard Houston.
Yep.
And I always get it wrong.
Let's cover our bases.
Anyways, He's a guy in the States who wrote a book called You're Gonna Need a Bigger Idea, a Bigger Story. You're gonna need a bigger story. And he talks about building brand awareness and a whole package, excuse me, as a filmmaker in this modern day and age, that you can't just step out with a script and just sort of go, hey, buy my script and it'll take care of itself. You have to build this whole, right?
So much to do.
What did he call it? Transmedia. So, and he uses an example of a young script writer who came to him with like a 10-minute short, and he's like, look, it's a nice story and everything, but no one knows who you are. What are you doing? Do you have any following? All that kind of stuff that you and I from our generation sort of like, social media.
I know. But another thing to do, isn't it? Yeah.
Another thing to do. And so he launched the idea of creating, obviously.
So we've got the dog in the studio too. It's today. He's piping in there. He'll give his odd comment, here and there. He's quite vocal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
He likes to step in. To build a whole presence around whatever idea that you have. And so a year ago, I started writing my first feature film. And as I've gone along and done more research on how am I going to get this thing off, not only get it off the ground, because I want, as an actor, I want to be in my own film. How do I get to that next stage? And one of those things was to start a podcast. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that this podcast is if I'll be 100% honest, to build awareness around my own brand and things that I'm working on and building, and then at that same time talking to people in Melbourne, and I'm sure we'll branch out and talk to people from different parts of the world who are actors who are having to now diversify, and more specifically also the themes that they want to get involved in.
Yep.
And I dare say for the first, section of this podcast's life will be more themes that are topical, and people who are hoping to sort of create some sort of change through their film.
Yep.
For those of you who are tuning in, Anthony is a Melbourne-based musician, actor, writer. You've produced. Yeah. You've been out
getting into producing recently.
Yeah, you've been out in the States for multiple trips over the last couple of years that I've known you, and worked on different projects like The Bruce. Fill me in on some others.
Yeah, The Orchard was just my most recent trip out there, and then recently as well. Actually, the time before that, that I headed over there to film The Orchard, and it got pushed back, as projects often do, due to budgets and timing and casting and all that. And ended up picking up a television show called Wiped. Did a couple of episodes.
That's
with a
right.
character,
Yeah.
Which was
I think you sent me a quick little snap of you in your attire and what
That's
have
right.
you for that.
Yeah, I think I was a bit cleaner, a bit cleaner cut then. But a bunch of things. Yeah, tradesmen, you name it. I always laugh quite a lot, because people with actors and musicians, that people say, my God, geez, you do so much. You're good at so many different things. It's like, yes, because like all other actors and musicians, we need to make money. So we do
money
the thing
talks, man, and bullshit walks.
Yeah, and then we do, X, Y, and Z, and all the other letters of the alphabet to try and basically pad that out and make money to then pursue our dreams that we want to do. But we also need to do that in a way that we're not locked into that income stream that we can't then go to auditions or take time off to do a project. So it's a very hard. It can be a very hard thing to manage, and I think it's 3 years that you end up sort of pulling together your what works for you and your little niche. And it's the same as you. We're both, let's say, in our 30s. We can say that. Yeah. Let's say ish. When you get on the other side of it, when you're in your 30s and stuff, we don't want to be bartending, we don't want to be waiting and stuff.
Fuck no.
You feel like you're over that sort of thing. So it is about creating that stability, getting enough income, and doing all those things to then be able to pursue. But that's a rather long-winded answer, but that's sort of what I do, and that's why I do a bunch of different stuff. And producing's been one of the more recent things that I've gotten into. Which we can sort of chat about that as we go along too.
Now, you had a bit of a win recently, and also to add, Anthony was a series regular on Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries.
Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. I played a character called Cecil Yates. And it was very clean cut.
Like the total opposite of how you now. It's a trip to see those photos of you actually.
And fun facts on that one. So I did 29 episodes over 3 years of that. We've sold that to 160 territories around the globe. I think it has. It's in German, French, Spanish.
Have you ever seen it in?
I have, yeah. And actually, if you put Netflix on, you can as well in there. You can switch the languages on it, which is really quite funny to hear yourself talking.
Is it on Netflix?
Yeah, it's on there. We're on Netflix as well.
What?
Yeah.
Gosh,
So
I didn't even know
I've made it.
That's awesome.
And I think it's somewhere around. I'm sure it's somewhere around the 20 to 30 million people viewed per episode. So it's pretty. It's done amazingly well around the globe, but have never been recognised off that show ever.
Do you know what? And this is not to
Funny.
look at what happened to me, but I got recognised off a 10-second spot in House Husbands.
There you go.
Isn't that crazy?
God
And
damn it!
I literally go, "Excuse me, Gemma," and that's it. And I was working on a commercial, and this woman was like, "I recognise you from somewhere." And I was like, "I was on House Husbands." She goes, "That's it, in the hospital." I was like, "What?"
The similar thing. I did You're the Voice. I did The Voice on Channel 9 a couple of years ago.
That's another one.
Yeah, so I'm
Listeners.
also a singer. Again, one of those things. I've been a singer professional singer for about 25 years, and I do 4 or 5 gigs a week on any sort of given week.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes up to 10 when I'm feeling stupid and tired at the end of it. But I did that, and I got through a couple of rounds in that before they booted me off, and it was so funny that I got recognised off that quite a bit, and a lot of people come out saying, "Wow, that's so amazing! You've made it," and I'm thinking, okay, so I do 2 or 3 episodes on a crappy singing reality show, and everyone says yeah, but yet I do 29 legit acting gigs with some of the cream of the crop acting
nothing.
and no one even knows it because it's on the ABC. But so it's funny, it's funny how that goes. But
well, my wife and I were talking about, we were watching the final episode of Handmaid's Tale.
Oh yeah.
And it was jamming all the time on SBS On Demand. Now we have shit internet, but I think everyone in Australia has shit internet. And we were like, oh, this must be Australia's most watched show at the moment. We did a quick Google check. It doesn't even feature Australia's most watched show above all on-demand streaming and everything else other than Game of Thrones when it was on.
I'm going to hate you for this, but tell me.
It's like Survivor.
Oh, Jesus.
And then probably Bachelor or some crap.
Gogglebox. Yeah, I get so frustrated at the programming. You know, and I hate getting into the negative side of things. I do like to keep it positive, but I think it's worth mentioning that the free-to-air television, and it is struggling and it is dying, and you've got all these streaming platforms come in, and that sort of makes me feel worried in a certain respect for that, and therefore the money's not there that it used to be in terms of advertising and all that sort of stuff, and reality shows are cheaper. But if you put on shit and you create shit, it's a downhill slide for me. You know, instead of quality programming, you know, there's so many reality shows that are coming on, you know, one after the other, and you know, and as much as I could say that, you know, having been in one, you know, probably might make me sound a little bit sarcastic. You know, I mean, and I guess, look, at least that one was, you know, it is about a skill, and it is about something,
100%,
you know,
100%.
Which gives,
some,
you know,
validity
something. It's certainly in terms of, you know, of all these other shows, just that sort of absolute diatribe crap that gets on, and getting quality programming and creating quality shows. We can create quality shows, and they don't even have to be so expensive, you know, to do that quality. And I really think that
they really don't.
And I feel sometimes the Australian television, it's so insular, and in terms of what it's creating, and not branching out, you know, to you know, again, to unknown actors, to storylines that are different, to all of these things. You know, it's very suburbanized, vanilla, a lot of the programming, and then it fails. Like, it goes okay for the first season, then the second season, I always say, is who's up. You know, the first season's quirky, second season is who's up who, and, you know, who hasn't paid. That's just how Australian television goes, and it just becomes that same sort of whitewashed, and you know, which is quite frustrating. And I think that's what streaming is doing, is they're creating television shows that are, you know, the characters are real. And I did a class recently, and the cast, he's a casting director, Greg Apps, who runs the course, and he talked about this with a lot of the streaming shows, and that these characters that they pull out, it's almost like they're real, like they're not. It's like, where did this person can't be an actor, they're so real as that character. You know, it's like they pulled a drug addict off, or a, you know, this or that, and they've put them in there, and they were somehow able to act. And so these streaming platforms are creating these just amazing worlds that you just get drawn into. I mean, you know, there's the whole binge watching, everything, just because the story writing and the characters are so engaging and different, and it's like that I suppose they're more able to take a risk, but they do, and you know, and therefore you get the viewers, and I feel that ABC and the SBS, you know, push that barrow a lot further than
they don't have as many strings around their necks. Well, and that's really interesting too, about what's happening in Australia and what's happening to actors like myself and you and nearly every actor that I know who, certainly in Australia, and even more interestingly enough, I was talking to a very good friend of mine who's, you know, been an actress for 20 years in New York. Yeah. And I said to her, you know, you're so lucky to be a native of America. You don't know how lucky you are in comparison to the struggle that we face here also. And she said, I got to tell you, I've had one audition since the beginning of the year, and I'm in New York, and most of my credits have been produced and created by me. And I was like, fucking hell. Like,
you got to, and that's that whole thing of that diversifying out, you know, while you're talking about, you know, you're a photographer, you're an actor, you're a writer, you're producing stuff as well. What's the girl, and I can't think of her name, and she wrote and starred in the
Lena Dunham? Oh no, that's Britt Marley.
Britt Marley, and again wasn't able to find interesting characters where, you know, she was doing that. She wrote the Beyond World, or the it's an alien film, was the first one she did, and then she's done the OA. And it's incredibly bizarre, random show, and it's
awesome.
It's such a great show.
I've just started watching the second season. Actually.
It's the last episode of that is great. You know, when she dies. Well, no, you can actually say that about that show, because that's all they do all the way through their first season.
Well, the same with Lena Dunham. Girls. Did you ever watch Girls?
No, I haven't seen Girls. No.
And my wife was pushing me to watch that for ages, and I was like, ugh, the title sounds terrible. You know? How judgmental is that? I watched
Pretty judgmental.
a clip, and I was like, shit. And then I watched the whole thing, and I was fucking hooked the whole way. And it is incredible writing. Adam Driver is next level. He's so good. And I think that was really a big breakout for him, actually, that show. I was very, very impressed. But let's move on to the sort of immediate motivation for this podcast. As you know, obviously, I've just got sort of through to the fourth draft of the park.
Yep.
Now, just for people listening,
yeah, fill us in.
Yeah, the park is, and I suppose this is the beauty of a long form conversation. I can give you the long-winded tale of how it all sort of came to be.
When I was a young boy.
Yeah.
The age of 3.
But basically, I met a guy. I was working with a fellow who was in Iraq as a soldier for the Australian Army, and we happened to be talking about what was happening in the Kruger National Park in South Africa with the near extinction of rhinos.
Yep.
And long story short, in the last 10, 11 years, the death toll per year has gone from sort of 63 to about 1,200 a year rhinos, and they reckon in about 9 years there won't be any left, which is
humans.
It's just bananas for reasons that have no scientific founding at all.
Because it's about the rhino.
It's about ancient Chinese medicine.
Yep.
It's also about status. People who, because it's worth, a horn can fetch for about 65,000 American dollars. It's more than gold. It's more than cocaine. It's more than anything else on the black market. It's crazy. It's probably as much as human organs, maybe. So you have rich people throughout Asia, which is, I would, and I'm guessing, but in my research is the heart of where it all goes. It can be as simple as, I've got, millions of dollars and I'd like to have a full intact horn on my shelf to show my guests.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of the drive. So, and the segue that I make there about the issue is that there are groups throughout the game parks in Africa who are anti-poaching units.
Yep.
And in certain countries in South Africa, in certain parks, they have a license to shoot on the spot.
Yep.
Not in the Kruger National Park, where the bulk of the rhino population exists. They cannot fire upon unless fired upon first.
Right.
And it's a very tricky situation. And when I was speaking to my friend who was now a real estate agent, and he said that he nearly joined up with one of these anti-poaching units. The South African government was paying them about $200,000 a year to protect these parks. He didn't, but I thought, geez, that's a really interesting story. Imagine, starting with a real estate agent reflecting on Iraq and Afghanistan and what have you, and then going off and doing this incredible thing for humanity after doing something that's not so great. Let's be honest. Sorry, buddy, but our efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan probably been for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously for the soldiers, I mean that's you are still doing your duty for your country. Whether it's wrong, you've
misguided
got to
or not.
That, when you put for one of those things, I think to go out and put the life on the line as part of your job is
it's next level.
It's
next
massive,
level
thing to do.
Yeah. And so that having a conversation with him led me to a group called VetPaw.
Right.
And they're a legitimate group in the Kruger National Park, which consists of American ex-soldiers who have formed this group. And now they're probably the most elite group. And sorry to anyone who's listening that's out there, that's a ranger in the parks who thinks that you're better. I don't know, but that's my research. Is they're the most highly trained former military in Africa protecting rhinos, and on their watch I think they've had probably the best success rate since they came in maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so I thought, I thought this is a really, really interesting story, one that has to be told, but how do I make it so that it doesn't only preach to the already converted? How do I wrap this up in a bundle and tell a story of something that's happening right now with fictitious characters that we're emotionally engaged to, apply the same cognitive function of narratives and storytelling and how that affects people without this big sort of doom and gloom type documentary.
Because that's what, with the documentary, like you say, it is people that will watch a documentary are already interested in that topic, and they are the converted, and documentaries can be purely by their message. It's sometimes it's too much for people, and they say, I don't want to know. Whereas you almost get tricked into learning about this by this narrative fictional story, which hooks you in, and 100%. People are able to watch that and then enjoy that, because there is an enjoyment element of it, and then all at the end of it, you are able to then go, holy crap, that is really happening. And then you may want to take some interest, to learn more about it.
There's so many people. I remember watching The Cove years ago, and so I'm already converted on all kind of animal conservation and endangered species, always have been. But The Cove, for those who have watched it, will know what the hell I'm talking about. Have you seen The Cove?
No, I haven't seen The Cove, no.
I mean,
yeah,
fucking hell. And I'm just like bawling by the end of it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get my friends to watch it, and they're like, oh no, I know what that's about. I can't bear to watch it. The slaughter of 26,000 dolphins per year in Taiji in Japan for no real reason other than tradition.
Yeah, that'd be...
It's fucking devastating.
So this is a Cove is a doco? Yeah.
Doco came out, I want to say 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. It's actually created, produced, constructed, the whole campaign is by a former trainer from SeaWorld in Florida that used to train, is it Skippy? No, what was the show?
Oh, Flipper.
He was a former trainer of Flipper.
Wow.
And how's this for a catalyst for changing your life? His last day in the pool, one of the dolphins swam up to him, looked him in the eyes, and dolphins have to consciously take every breath.
Right.
Whereas there's a word for it, but we breathe on auto.
Right.
They have to consciously take every breath. Looked him in the eyes, swam to the bottom of the pool, never took another breath.
Oh.
Because the anxiety of being in that tank was so horrific.
Oh God, what a goosebumps.
Right? This dolphin committed suicide before him. And he has been on this incredible warpath ever since. Yeah. And it's so hectic, and that shit is happening all the time, and it takes incredible people to force change. So it's an ambitious goal.
But I think it's great, and I think what's great about it is that you want to do something that you're passionate about on multiple different levels. And everyone says if you are going to achieve success, don't try and do it with something that you either know nothing about or that you're not passionate about. And the dog's up and he's around. But I think what's great about this is that you can take one love, which is, well, there's a whole bunch of acting, and be in the film, acting one of the roles, writing the scripts and creating, doing that as well, and producing this film, and then also tackling an issue that you're passionate about as well, and being able to roll that into something that would be an amazing. I mean, creating a film and doing that sort of work is it's such a collaborative, amazing effort. But to actually then affect change beyond just creating stories is fantastic, and I think that's probably the way that most of us, if you focus on that heavily enough, you will actually see the success in your career as well, because that's what it's also about. You're trying to advance that next step forward. So I think as many ways that you can bring your own passions is, because it's hard. I mean, and making films is hard, and it's expensive, and it's draining, and it takes time, and things fall over. So it's mentally quite, it's a lot of enduring, and having been involved in some low budget ones like the last one, Robert the Bruce, and seeing how that went and seeing how long that process goes for before and then during and then after, and all of the different things that you come up against during the pre-production and post phases. It's very taxing and it's very hard to do. And I think that if you aren't passionate enough, there's going to be
about the story,
yeah. and about but in terms of doing anything in life, and especially in this industry, there's going to be roadblocks that are going to come up that will stop you if your passion isn't there.
Yeah, to push on through, like it's say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is, and that really is. So if you don't have that level of drive with it, it is something that drives you. I think there's a big chance that it's dead in the water. There's so many scripts and so many projects and stuff that do not get through. And that's why they also say, a couple of the producing things that I'm doing at the moment, there's a bunch of different projects we've got, and then one looks like it's great and it's moving forward. One project we've got cast attached, really high level American cast. We've got Titus Welliver, Leonardo Nam from Fast and Furious and Westworld, and one of the youngest Skarsgård brothers in it as well. Now, this was all looking at going. It was going to be shooting this year, but it's just one of those things. Money changes and then it drops, and then funding. So then they get put on the back burner, and it's such a
constant grind. Hey?
It is a constant grind.
Yeah,
and you've got to grind it out, and you've got to change and adapt and do things. And even with this project, like we talk about creating opportunities for ourselves, and then you might get the project up. Someone come and say, we've got money for you. If it's a $4 million project, we've got $4 million, or we can actually give you $6 million, but you can't be in it. We need a bigger name. So you're gonna, and then these things happen, and then you've got to decide and work with it. Do I hold on? So it's a real tough game. Like it's as exciting as it is. It's a hard sort of slog. So mate, I
brutal.
Wish you all the best with this one. I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, even just now getting another opinion on as I'm sort of crowd testing the script, and going to people who actually know what they're, and I say this with all due respect to people who are looking at it from a non-analytical point. You start, for those of you who are out there writing scripts for the first time, you'll know this through your research, that you need to start spreading it to as many people who can give you constructive feedback as possible, because it's very hard when you've been on it for 6 months or a year and you're staring at it every day, to see where a character's arc might drop when it needs to, it's not complete, or there's a plot hole, or you've got...
Well, you're stuck on an idea.
Yeah,
sometimes you're stuck on an idea and someone comes in and they say, have you thought... this is great, or or this is going too long. What about these two characters merge, or this there's too much in this one. What if you had this in this character, or
you need that
situational
stuff,
stuff,
feedback. Constantly. And even when I've had a paid analyst go over it, great notes, 10-page breakdown, injected all of those. Then you and I had a look at it, and you've gone, I really think this is great. This is a part that could speed up, and then I've put that in there, and then my wife has looked at it. She's got a great eye for film. She's a big cinephile as well, and she's like, I kind of feel like maybe you're dropping the arc of the female character here a little bit, so it's good to get her perspective, as a guy writing from a white privileged male perspective about a story that's happening in Africa, which is incredibly diverse and broken and fractured and doing all kinds of craziness. To then having another a friend of mine who's a playwright and an actress and runs an off-Broadway theatre company in New York, going, now I feel like so she was the first person to say to me, I wasn't engaged until sort of halfway through the second act.
Yeah, right.
Which everyone else has been, not the other way around, not engaged at the end. I was come out of the gates a bit more engaged, so it's interesting to see her perspective. And then she's like, I feel like you've dropped a point here, and how do you take all of this stuff and not be sensitive and go, that's cool, I can see that, or maybe I'll just, and also keeping true to your own instincts about storytelling
and it is that thing of keeping true to what you want to do, but then also taking on board, you know, professional opinion, being new to the game of script writing, as we both are, both having a bit of an innate knowledge about storytelling and that from the years of acting and being involved with scripts. But I think it's smart, and like I always say, you haven't lost that last draft. I think, you know, and I think that's a really important thing we do is we get attached to an idea, and it's very hard to change. And there's that thing where you say, I want to hear it, and you do actually. I mean, I've had written different things and actually I've asked for feedback, got feedback, and got sort of pissed off, you know, with it. Not that I've said anything, but I'm like, oh, fuck you, that was my favourite part. But then I've gone away.
What the fuck do you know, man?
Yeah, but then I've gone away, and I think always looking at it, someone said to me, you've still got that script is there, that draft is there, go away, rewrite this one, like, you know, and take on board those notes, have a read of it, and then if it doesn't, then you can say, no, I went down that path.
I tried it,
it didn't work, as opposed to blocking it straight away. And I think sometimes that thing even with a writing room that a lot of places have, and that's what a lot, you know, when they go to a bigger studio, they'll get the writer's room in and they'll take your script and they go, right, let's look at this, you know, and you've got that collaborative vibe with it. And it is really great to be able to say, I'm just going to put down my preconceived ideas. I'm going to take all of this on board. There's no bad ideas. Let's look at it. And then we'll have a bit of a play and then we'll see how it feels. But then I'm going to come back to, you know, what I want. And I'm going to look and say, yes, this is still on track. This is better. Or no, it doesn't work. And I think that's probably a good approach. And I think it's great to get lots of advice to a point. But there's the other factor with different things, and I'm also a website designer. That's another thing that I do, and I do a lot of brand and identity design and all that sort of stuff. And there's this funny thing like with logos, companies' logos and branding and that, and I'll have clients and they'll tell me what they want, and then they'll go out and they said, oh look, I've taken this idea out and I've shown, you know, I've asked for advice off people I know, and if you ask people for advice, they'll fucking give it every time, and some people don't warrant giving advice because they just shouldn't, because they've got no idea. I won't swear too much on this, but they've got no idea.
Mate, you can swear all you want.
I can swear all I want.
That's the beauty of podcasts.
Some people have no fucking idea, and if you ask for their opinion, they'll give it and they'll turn it into advice. But that advice isn't sound, and
you can fuck with your head.
Yeah, so I think it's also, you want a collection of trusted advisors that you really do trust. But then you really listen to their advice too, and you don't get pissed off, and you don't, you know, and it might differ from you, and you might be able to argue that out a little bit, but you do really take their advice on board, you know. And again, I've got a great mate of mine, Scott Smith, who's a South African producer. Which
that's right.
Once we get to a certain point, you know, when you're really happy with his script and he's a great script writer, and he will call a spade, but he's also got a lot of on the ground knowledge over there, and I think that's one thing that is going to be very important in this day and age in terms of, and you touched on it, that authenticity, where you, and you know, again, a white middle-aged privileged background writing about a subject in another country where you do need collaborators on board on the ground there to give the project the validity. And now I don't always necessarily, I don't agree with that, because I think that you can be from a total different point of view, and you can do your research, and you can have the empathy, and you can have the knowledge, and you can create something great. But in today's day and age, you really do need to have that collaboration.
100%, and it may even be, I believe, probably good to speak to him pretty soon, in terms of like a lot of my friends' notes, they're really great. Whether I'm going to use them or not, I'm not sure. I'll go over it. But one of the big questions we've been talking about for the lead female character is she white, or is she black, or what have you, a native in South Africa? Because when I wrote the character, it wasn't, of course, from any kind of, I need this character to be white. I just stumbled across a woman, and I won't say her name, but who was a South African woman, white, blonde, blue-eyed, and she runs a big organisation that is out there protecting
so it's more seeing that character, and then
and as a tribute to her in a way, because she helped, and once again I could be wrong about this, but she's certainly at the forefront of it, what they call a devaluation procedure. And what they do now, instead, what they did for a lot of years was cut the rhino's horns off, because they grow back like fingernails. So a poacher wouldn't shoot it, obviously. But now they do what's called a devaluation procedure, where they inject the horn with the dye that you find in banks,
Right.
that explodes when people
make
money.
Right.
They've added toxin to it. But it doesn't. There's a word for it, but it doesn't affect the animal.
Yep.
But it infects the human who ingests it, and it dyes the horn red. So that obviously a poacher is looking at that horn, going, "Motherfucker, I can't shoot that one."
So and in terms of having you spoke about one of the things where people want to have a rhino's horn just because they're an asshole.
Yeah.
Does that being red and being dyed sort of
that'll kill them?
That?
If they ingest
No. Sorry. So for the arsehole that wants to say, I've got this rhino horn up on my shelf, does that stop? Is that stop because it's red, or?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think that they're in the lower end of the consumers. The high end of consumers is people who are trying to cure ailments.
Yeah.
Cancer, hangovers, dick dysfunction, fucking inflammation.
There's things for that, and they're called drugs, and you can
or meditation, or just go to a therapist. For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Get a good night's rest. Don't drink so much. Have a sparkling water the next day. Do some push-ups.
I don't eat right or exercise, and I drink and do drugs, but I'm just not feeling right. So I think I might need some rhino horn.
So this woman, back to what we were saying, she is at the forefront of this procedure, and what's really interesting, Vietnam seems to be the epicenter of the trade. Is a few years ago, maybe about 2 years ago, I want to say, they did a billboard campaign type thing through Vietnam, which had information about the dye and a sort of pictogram sort of saying, if you eat a red horn, if it looks like it's red, it's going to kill you. And the Vietnamese government made them take it down. If that tells you anything about what's happening in Vietnam. And so one of the things that I also found through my research is that they can sort of pretty confidently tie the massive spike in demand to a Vietnamese politician who publicly announced that he had cured his cancer with rhino horn. Boom! Thousands of rhinos getting nailed, and the price went through the roof. Now, I haven't been able to find a name on this guy, but he does make a fictionalized appearance in the park.
Yep.
But what happened with the campaign that they put up in Vietnam, and then it got ripped down, is they received so much backlash on a public scale that the government was forced to reintroduce that campaign. And since then, there has been a steady taper off. It's definitely peaked. Who knows where it'll go from here, but more and more Vietnamese people and Asian people are starting to at least be somewhat educated that don't buy the red horn. And if there's more red horn being created in Africa, and what they call like level, so they break down traffickers in levels. A poacher is a level 1. The person buying and distributing on the other end, if I understand it correctly, is a level 5, and everyone in between. If the level 3s, who are sort of facilitating the level 1s in Africa on the grounds with money and weapons and what have you, are sort of saying, don't shoot anything that's red because we can't sell it. There's the idea, and hopefully that sort of helps steers it in a new direction.
Mate, well, hopefully you can get this and make some more effect too.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's listening and you're a filmmaker in Melbourne or in Australia, and you're in a similar boat to Anthony and myself, and where you're doing a little bit of this and you're doing a little bit of that, and long gone are the days where, especially in Australia, this has been my experience, where agencies, unless you're in the top 10, can get you in the room anymore. It's completely changed.
Yeah, it is.
I can tell you from my own experience, I have sourced every major role that I've got on my own, and whilst being with an agent.
Yep.
you're probably experiencing that yourselves. This is what this podcast is really about: is people like us who are out there you're having to learn how to write, and you're having to learn how to maybe shoot something and direct something and maybe produce something. And you're also, the last film that I did, I ended up doing the costume, the set design. I produced and I paid for it, and then I crowdfunded part of it as well. So there's a whole other thing. I did catering as well. I cooked for everyone. Like, you're having to do all these things. This podcast is for us, and I hopefully, if we start to build some traction and I get more and more people on here to discuss what they're up to, it becomes a little bit of a platform for people to talk about the projects that they're working on. And people tuning in might go, oh, I'm really interested in that. And anyone who's listening, reach out, and we can all sort of start to maybe help that process.
Yeah, great.
A little bit, you know.
And obviously, you know, we ramble around a bit today on our first one.
But that's the beauty
part
of it. Exactly. No, we don't want this to be a infomercial.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And what I would like to also do with this podcast, in terms of who we speak to, is people who are making films that have some kind of, I guess you could say, a helpful objective. I love all genres of film, but to say, I really want to speak to people. I actually know a girl here in Melbourne who's just written a film and is crowdfunding at the moment, and I'd love to get her on next. And it's really interesting because it's a female director, writer, and producer who have written a film about abusive relationships the other way, where the woman is abusive to the man.
Yep. And
she's put together this 5-minute, interview section of people that she interviewed before promoting the film. Men who'd been physically abused, raped by their partners, emotionally abused, and she's crowdfunding at the moment. That's a really powerful narrative and objective that it was really, really happening. So that will be, I think, one of the sort of topics on the filmmakers that we talk to, is filmmakers who are trying to elicit change or open up or pull the lid off something that maybe people aren't talking about or what have you.
Great, mate. Thanks for having me in.
Pleasure. Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks for all of our listeners.
Yeah.